And we can get started whenever you're ready.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is the 9:45 Clark Community Benefits Meeting. We have quorum, so we can go ahead and get started.
Alice Newsom, Desiree Simmons,
Here.
Lisa Volker,
Here.
John Lusk,
Virtual.
Edwin,
Here.
Alice Elliott,
Also virtual.
Steve Wilcoxon.
Present.
With 4 present, there is a quorum.
All right. How are you? Good, running from Ann Arbor. I know, coming from Ann Arbor. That'll make anyone late. All right, so I think the next thing we have is approving the agenda. So we'll have public comment, we'll discuss the community benefits, so we'll approve our minutes from our last meeting. And then we'll have a discussion and prioritization of the proposed community benefits and then adjourn. Is there anything anybody else would like to add to that? No?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'm sorry, are we asking about what to add to the possibilities?
We were just saying about the agenda. Oh, what to talk about for the agenda. Would you like to add something?
Oh, not to the agenda. I was going to suggest there was a list that was generated of possibilities, and I was going to ask for a slight mod on one of the items I had put on. But I thought that's what you were asking about, and I'm sorry I interrupted because it's obviously agenda items, and I don't have a new agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we get a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Do we have anyone for public comment? All right. No one for public comment. We can jump to the discussion. So first we will approve our minutes. Anybody have anything to add or change to those? If not, we can go ahead and get a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes from the March 29th meeting.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right, so now we're at the meat of our meeting, right where we need to be. So we are going to be thinking about the discussion and prioritization of our benefits. We do have a list that we are working off of, which we can come back to, and there are some things that we were gonna revisit. And I'd like to talk about, before we jump in, if we could just talk about what we want to try to accomplish today in particular, and then jump in. But before we do, I want to hear what John, what you were wanting to add, so that we have all of the things in front of us.
Thank you. I had suggested the train station simply out of, well, what does the city need? And it's probably pretty far-fetched, actually. But closer to home, the power plant right virtually next door to this property has the building. It may even be in the National Historic Register, I don't know. But it's iconic for the city. And my feeling is that it would be a great opportunity to have that repaired, brought up so that meetings could happen there, just like the Freight House, etc. Clean up the graffiti, fix the windows with, reasonably shatterproof glass type stuff, maybe even light the sign. So all I was suggesting was that we replace the train station, unless somebody objects to taking that off the list, with rehabbing the power plant building at the Peninsula Park.
Oh, thanks for asking, because I was like, oh, is this the Penn Park area that you were talking about? Okay, let's add that and talk about that just a minute. Steve, because I know you've been so involved with all the things around Penn Park. do you have any thoughts about that, or have there been other conversations about?
We haven't got to the point, yet, where we're working up a budget for restoration, for that aspect of the project, so we haven't really talked about that. It's been discussed to make that, to renovate the building, but we haven't got to the point of building a budget and looking for grants. And things like that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that addition. All right, so, just a couple of quick things. At our last meeting, we had, oh, shoot. Okay. Last meeting, we had a couple of things that we were gonna follow up on, and so some folks had some particular things they were gonna dig into. So before we, I would definitely like to kind of hear what those were, what those updates are on those particular things. So that's definitely something I would like for us to do. I'm just gonna add that to the list. What are some things that folks want to make sure that we get to today?
I'm interested in the possibility of scheduling one more meeting. And definitely open to not doing that because everybody's busy. But I think we have one more meeting scheduled. And I would like today to start to work on some specific language. And I just don't know if, what is that, 2.5 hour, 5 hours is enough for us to reach a point where we can have a really solid thing to vote on. So just throwing that out there is something to talk about, but also we could really buckle down and get something in 5 hours.
Great, well, let's come back to that
Yeah, we can talk
conversation
about that right now.
Mhm.
Okay.
Cool. Other things that folks want to make sure we cover tonight?
It would be great if we could spend, I don't know, tonight, maybe narrowing things down that we all agree on. I don't know what like a number of things are, so that when we come back together, we have that whole time for the language and to really hone in on those pieces. I would love to have some feedback from Kyle before the end of this evening to, just in terms of, I both don't want to underestimate what we can accomplish, but I don't want to be overly enthusiastic in terms of wasting time.
Okay.
So, I would like to, I want to just hear.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that we went through at the end of last meeting and we did get some of that.
Yep.
And Kyle has some things that he's bringing back to us too. So I think we'll definitely have that. And it's, what I'm hearing from that is that, because I too am like, I don't know if it's necessarily about narrowing down, but I do think it's good for us to know what our agreements are and kind of being able to move from that.
Okay.
Chris?
Yeah, thank you. Might I suggest a prioritization? I know from council goal setting, that seems to be a really good way to hone in on areas where people disagree or areas where there's not a lot of consensus. And from there, you might develop some rough idea of costs and figure out what's appropriate for the incentive requested.
Mhm.
So it's a simple way to approach it.
I like that.
Sorry, go ahead, Evelyn.
I like that also. I also don't know that we have all the information yet about costs. But we can still work on the prioritizing.
Yeah, I think that we had a couple of things, so maybe we can kind of jump into these different pieces. So let me see here. These aren't in any particular order necessarily. But Alice, I know you were going to maybe look into or think about the on-site tutoring activities for children in the food pantry and free store. Were you able to kind of put some thoughts to that and have some things to share?
Yeah. I drew up what I like have no idea if this language is legit or not, but I like wrote a few sentences of what I thought that language could look like. And I'd be down to like talk more about what that looks or what sorts of possibilities this could envision, or whether this is completely like bananas and not worth talking about. Shall I go ahead and say what I wrote?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I wrote that I would like to see that the common spaces of this development or these apartments to host or otherwise provide space for community activities. Examples could include a food pantry, a free store, a tutoring site for a local nonprofit or other similar community opportunity. I also included that I think that the property manager could staff this site with at least one person, either a paid staff member or a volunteer. And then I also said that I think that if this amenity ceases to exist for some reason, whether the staff person's let go or people like I don't know other reasons, then the property manager will work to reinstate that space.
Great.
I don't know.
Yeah. Thanks. Other comments or additions?
That sounds really excellent, Alice. Thank you for doing that work.
Yeah, I know I don't necessarily, I want to ask for more because I'm sure we're gonna have to bargain down some stuff. So aiming high.
I think that those things all sound great and very reasonable. And one of the thoughts I had too was, when you're talking about like how the site could be staffed, or like upkeep, I could see a couple of different things for that. I could see that as part of the work of the resident committee. I could see that as a partnership too with the senior housing site as well. I say this because my family, we're very into Kiwanis. We haven't been there in a long time, but it's run by retired folks and it's very well organized. And they have very limited
Yeah, that
hours.
was kind of what, sorry.
It was great. So yeah, was that?
That was
So,
kind of what I was thinking was like, especially if they're working with a local nonprofit, like that nonprofit will probably have people in mind that would be excited about working in that space. So it would be less of a burden on the property.
Yeah, for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. So, and then also the way that you have the language too, in terms of that the space could host or provide space for different community events and things like that. It's like they could be specific to specific times or could be open. So other thoughts or things on that?
Would now be a good time for me to provide some feedback and thoughts, or happy
Sure.
to do it later too? So I think broadly, Alice, what you're proposing is something that we could do. So first of all, for making the common spaces available or sort of eligible for use by some of these outside groups to be determined, I think that's something that we can do. And what I would propose from a staffing perspective is that we maybe say that we can work on this, but maybe say that the use of that space would be coordinated in partnership with property management and one of these nonprofits or something like that, or multiple. I mean, it wouldn't have to just be one group that could use the space. It could be that maybe a tutoring group uses it on Wednesday nights and a free store uses it on Saturdays. And I think that property management would want to and need to be involved in making time slots and making sure that the space is available. But property management wouldn't be the right person to actually staff on behalf of the organization. Not that that's what I think you were suggesting, but just to distinguish between those couple of things. So if, and Desiree, you touched on something that we'll talk about maybe more next or later, but this resident committee, if it's, either in partnership between the resident committee and the property manager to kind of figure out who and broadly when, and then the organizations then can provide their individuals during the times in which they're holding events. That to me seems very workable. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, that's great. And then as we kind of go through this, maybe we can say how we feel in terms of our priority for this happening. Maybe if we think about like one is, if it 0 would be like, I literally don't care. One might be like, whatever, I don't, like, if this happens, fine, but it's not. And then 5 is like, yes, I really want this. So for the on-site tutoring activities and free pantry, free store, thinking about the common space as being able to be accessed by community, how would you all rate that? John,
I am holding
Sure.
up 5.
I see your 5, Alice.
They're gonna be, we shouldn't take their scores, right?
I'd
We
say a
take
3.
scores
Three.
online.
Or,
They can't really vote.
We had,
5.
you can.
okay.
I don't think we can. I don't think we can. Because they can't vote.
Okay, so we have another 4.
What's that?
2 5.
This is just an unofficial.
2 5s. 2 4s. 2 5s, 3
It's kind of a
4s.
vote.
And a 3.
We're not really
Yeah, I'm just
voting.
trying to get a
Actually,
sense.
wait, sorry.
Straw poll.
Virtual people are allowed to vote.
Yeah, we actually want to get a ruling from our legal counsel, just make sure what we're doing is legit, so we can make sure.
They're just building a consensus, but I don't know.
Yeah, my understanding of this was that, or of what you were just asking me, Desiree, was more of like a fist of 5, kind of like how are people, like, we're rating
Yeah.
our prioritization of these things. We're not voting on a specific thing, right?
Yeah, I think that they're having a conversation about something different.
Oh, gotcha.
No, it's.
That's what they're talking.
So if it-
So if you're getting information to gain a consensus, I wouldn't think that would be a vote.
okay,
Yeah,
I'm good
it's
with it.
more,
But
yeah.
if you're voting on something that's gonna bring things in or is gonna ultimately make a decision, then that should, that needs to be public.
I think we're just gaining information.
Yeah, so right now we're just trying to get a sense of prioritization as we go through, and then we will have to officially kind of put things in. But if you're saying, I don't know that we were at that point yet. I think we were just trying to get a sense of consensus around it.
If you were to affirm that by vote, I think that might be the line, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was kind of going back to the conversation of the fist of 5 that we had in that first meeting. So, okay, thank you. That gives me enough information. The next,
I do have a question about that. So we're supposed to be looking at, the questions I have is who's responsible for running the organization? And what time frame do we have and what are the metrics that we need to have in that? So is it just getting it in place? Having a certain number of meetings within a certain amount of time, or is it number of attendance or things like that? So.
As a metric for successful implementation.
Yeah.
So a couple of things that I would propose for that. I appreciate kind of talking through this because then we kind of are working out language as we go, which I like. So a couple of things that I would think for that would be one, maybe, once the property's open, like a certain time frame to outreach, do some outreach to invite boards to consider the space, maybe might be something I would think about. Maybe 3 months or something, that's just a thought. Another thought I might have would be around, how many, like maybe a start of a certain number of community events in this space. So that shows like goodwill of inviting folks in. And then I would say, some kind of something to show that the property management has put together like a calendaring, like worked out a calendaring system or something within a certain amount of time. There's other thoughts or feedback on any of those?
Yeah, I would say that putting enough time in for understanding what people need, what the needs are once people move in. I'm not sure, that was another question I had, just Kyle, how quickly do you foresee it filling up? Like, is this something that's gonna fill up like in a month, or is it gonna take 6 months to fill it?
It won't fill in a month. I would think it more likely what we're expecting is that will take between 6 and 12 months to fill up entirely. It will start
Okay.
leasing right away. It will start filling right
Sure.
away, but it will take a period of time to fill up
Sure.
completely.
Okay. So relative to that process, I don't think it has to be completely full before any of this is started, but what is a good way to see what people really need? Before, as much as we can before it's planned, like the structure could be planned, but the content. And then like times, so if people need tutoring, is it like at 7 o'clock at night, or do they need it right after school? So just things like that, so that.
So like a survey maybe, like
Yeah,
do like a survey of the residents kind of thing?
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
I have a question for Kyle. Is this something that can be promoted during the leasing? So that when people show up for leasing, this could be, we could have a flyer or a pamphlet of some sort to say that this is one of the things that would be available, because I could see that being a selling point.
Yeah, I think that could be. It could be a selling point and a resource kind of at the same time, right? It's kind of like, here are some things that will happen within the community. And yeah, I agree, that could be viewed as a selling point. Also just good information for somebody who is considering moving in. I really wonder if some of this sort of promotion and almost creation of priorities of these organizations is something that could be done in conjunction with the resident committee. I know we haven't talked about that yet, but we should keep that in mind. I really think that'd be a good a good partnership between the committee and these outside organizations. After all, the committee will be representing priorities of the residents.
Sorry, Kyle, I completely agree with you, just in terms of sustain, like if it's gonna last, it's probably gonna fall on, a lot of the work is actually gonna fall on the community members and the organizations and the desires and needs of folks. So if it's though, yeah, if those relationships are immediately determined by the resident committee or whatever it is, I like that too.
So just for clarification's sake, are we imagining some of these activities happening? I'm looking at the floor plans right now that were provided in the March 3rd packet. So these sorts of services we're thinking would be happening in like the family apartment clubhouse space. Is that where you're imagining this happening, Kyle, as we're talking about this? Since you can
Either the family clubhouse space, that's the community space on the family site, or what's not as readily visible on the senior building, which is H-shaped, is right in the middle, where you see kind of there's like a half circle drive. That's the entrance of. That's the entrance of the building, and that's where there will be community space, including like a club room and gathering space and things like that, right in that sort of core. Like you'd walk in, there will be your manager's office, there's likely a reception desk, and there's a little bit of office space, and there's back of house stuff for files and things like that that are required for compliance. But then on the other side of the main sort of entrance is your gathering space, and it will be large. There will be multiple gathering spaces, And so there could be events that are held there as well. So I was thinking in one or both of those spaces. Could be to be determined.
Do you know
Probably,
anything
yeah.
about what kinds of things happen in those spaces in communities that you know that y'all manage that don't have the kind of programming that we're envisioning right now? Like, are those spaces being utilized every day?
They are. You know, in like the club room type space or the gathering space, there's typically kind of various seating areas and kind of almost like the room is broken up. It's open, but it's broken up into some different uses. There's sometimes it's like a fireplace in a seating area where people may gather and spend time. Oftentimes there's some seating, almost like nooks along one side, and as the pandemic has gone on, those have become more common as sort of little offshoot workspaces for people if they don't want to be working in their apartment unit. There's outdoor gathering space as well, as we've talked about. You know, there are pools at these properties, and they have like outdoor grilling areas and outdoor gathering spaces outside. They'll both have fitness rooms. That's not really applicable to the outside like tutoring and things like that. Although I suppose there could be some sort of outside fitness class or something like that could be used. So, you know, general community gathering as well as people wanting to work in a different location are probably the most common. And then there are also residents who will have events. Someone wants to have a birthday party. Someone wants to have a potluck or even like a holiday celebration. So sometimes we will work on ways where for a very short period of time, a resident can reserve a space, and that would be only one of the spaces, but a resident could reserve a space for kind of a more special event as well.
Is there the possibility of working with your architects to expand any of the spaces in these plans here to have, for example, a permanent sort of free store space?
Yeah, I think,
or permanent sort of food pantry space for residents to access? It wouldn't have to be large necessarily, but you know, like the size of an additional package room sort of thing.
yeah, I think when we had talked about this before, we had determined that we had the room to use for those. You know, ideally we would be able to use the space that's already there, rather than adding a one-off additional space for one of these uses. It just adds construction costs. It adds additional room that I think we have the space for, but I'm happy to keep the conversation open.
Well, is there a way to, within the space, to in some way cordon off something so that it kind of feels like it's its own particular space so that it could be accessible constantly? Is that what you're like?
Yeah,
Yeah,
add a little stud wall somewhere.
Yeah.
You know,
Or
not
you're thinking more like, I know you use the free store as an example, but would it be more like sort of this community, I'd say like broader community space? It would be a room or some sort of designated area that wouldn't have just a specific use like free store only and like tutoring only, but it could be a room that could be used for all of those uses, but more exclusively those uses. Is that what you're thinking?
No, I'm thinking of, I think a lot of the sort of like having, you know, the on-site tutoring activities or like community enrichment sorts of activities could take place in the club room or craft theater rooms that you've got already. I'm imagining a place, I'm looking right now at floor plan at elevation A8 on the family clubhouse, just so you know what I'm looking at. And I'm imagining a space kind of like, it's like page 18 in the packet that we received, 1827. I'm looking at like, there's a little room off of off the bottom of the maintenance room on the far right-hand side of that floor plan, or I'm looking at like the package room off of the vestibule. I'm imagining a space about that size
Mhm.
that has its own shelving and, maybe a door, maybe not a door, that is just a place where residents can share things with one another, that's always available and accessible, so you can have that as a resource for people to use, where they can go and get a can of beans if they need a can of beans, get a sweater for their kids grow out of clothes, they can put some clothes on the shelves there for somebody else to use, without having that to be something that is like only available from 2 to 4 on Thursdays, or having those resources need to be packed up and put away and managed by someone, but just have that be like a community resource on site that's always there.
And ideally accessible, do you think from the outside? I'm just trying to think more about it, as opposed to from going from the inside, or is that not as necessary in your mind?
I'm not sure what the hours are on these kinds of buildings. I would like the space to be accessible for as much of the day as possible, because people work different shifts, you have different times when you're home and need to access stuff. So ideally, it wouldn't be constrained by like an office worker being there to open and close the space. I don't know that it needs to be accessible to, like, I'm just imagining this maybe as a place that mainly serves the residents of this complex, if that's what you're asking.
Well, yeah, I was really just thinking about access. So I guess
if you go to the
to more fully respond to your first question, let me talk with our architect about that, and let me see what we could do to potentially find some space, carve out some space for what you're talking about. So what you're really saying, what I was initially thinking was you were maybe saying like a space for the tutoring set aside, a space for the free store set aside, a space for sort of multiple different uses set aside.
It might help for you to envision this as a food pantry that carries things other than food,
Yep. Understood. Yeah, understood.
So it's really only looking for a particular space for one of those, and then the other things can be within the open spaces that you're.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have a little bit of homework to do on that, but let me talk with the architect on how we could potentially either reconfigure some of this space or find a way to grow some area to be able to provide the space that you're looking for.
That would be great. I think that would, I don't think it needs to be a huge amount of space. Doesn't need to be 100 square feet, but I think having a designated space would be a huge service to the community.
Yeah.
Does it have refrigeration? Or just not?
I mean,
Because that would influence the electrical.
if it was big enough to have a refrigerator.
What was
that would be
the
great.
question?
The question is if it would need to have refrigeration. Thank you for bringing that up, Steve. That would be an ideal scenario, that there would be a refrigerator that could be in that space.
Yeah, so for that we would.
I think that would be cool, but sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, Alice, sorry to talk over you. All I was going to say was that if we were going to do that, we'd need to account for the refrigerator and just the amount of other space that's available, but then also we'd have to have electrical, which having electrical isn't a big deal. Creating of the space is the most of the cost. So I think I would just ask to make sure we had adequate outlets. In fact, I think you're probably required by code to have a certain number of outlets in every one of these rooms anyway. So that's all.
Can I put that as a bonus, refrigeration?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason why I wanted to chime in is we've had issues with one of the free stores in the city where it is free and open and accessible to everyone. However, we are seeing milk and eggs out on 100-degree days left for extended period of times, and sometimes vegetables are rotting. and attracting rodents. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened here by any means, it's a completely different thing, but I think that the refrigeration piece is actually key if you are going to have a free store, because if you're gonna have free items, you want to make sure they are kept at a safe rate, and there's not really a whole lot of regulations, but if you are gonna have people leaving milk for other people to have, you need to have it at a safe temperature.
Okay.
So it's something where
Yeah.
I would beg you to do something like that if you do want that, just so we don't have any other issues going.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a great, yeah, so, yeah, that sounds great, Kyle, to think about. Maybe that possibilities both ways would be good, and that way, yeah, that sounds great, that's a great addition. Does that sound good, Steve? Or are there other things? I think we got, right now I have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like kind of accountability measures around this for us to come back to.
Mhm.
Okay.
That sound good? Can we move on to the next thing?
Yes.
Sweet, all right. So, let's see here. Since this was kind of coming up during this conversation, maybe we can jump to the resident tenant committee. And Lisa, I had that you were gonna look into this or think about this a bit.
Yes, so. Things that I've found, so when I was searching this out, I realized that there's a lot of examples of like association committees, but not a ton of examples of kind of, I think, what we're going for. So, oh, this is the wrong one. I'm sorry. I can pull it up on my phone, but I did copy a mission from a group in Boston that I thought kind of encompassed what at least I was envisioning for a committee. So I will pull that up in just one second. But I also thought that I looked up different kinds of names. So resident advisory committee, core resident committee, residents council. There was also more like residents negotiating organization. So I was interested in teasing out the name of it a little bit to see if that like kind of made a difference in how we approach the idea. And also, Kyle, curious to hear about if you had anything back about how that's gone down in other places. So one thing I wrote down, I didn't, this is choppy language, but more than a community building group, a decision influencing and negotiating committee is one criteria. And funded. So at least initially, like if there's some sort of system where like, let's say this entity is going to be funded for the first 3 years in order to establish X, Y, and Z. And I think it can be pretty modest. But I don't want to go into this with the idea that I know that people actually want to participate in this who are going to live there, or that I know how they want to participate. So my request is that if we could talk about it in that sense of like how to make it as open-ended as possible and decided by people, but also give like a good structure so that it's not hugely like laborious for people to take it on. I know it will take work, but I also found 2 resources that I was going to ask how to appropriately get to everyone. From Michigan Legal Help, and then from the NLIHC, which is the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And there's just 2 things that I was hoping that maybe I wanted to understand how we were allowed to engage with that research in between now and then, because I can bring it to us next time or something, but there is research about tenants organizing in different ways in subsidized housing. And I looked at some of like the HUD rules and like multifamily. So there's a lot about that. So I'm not exactly sure how to go forward. I had a question for Kyle about a handbook. Is there anything that you guys do as a normal protocol that has a handbook that explains everything? Like I'm picturing sort of a tenant's guide
Mhm.
that goes a little bit beyond saying like, this is who you call if your heater breaks. A little bit beyond that. Is that a norm?
It's not a norm. It's more like a resident manual that has sort of maintenance related and community contact information.
Okay.
So that's typically what's provided. It does vary by community, so it's hard to say that it's this, hard to give it exactly the same structure, but typically it's more like here's who you contact for maintenance, here's the property management contacts, here's how you go about, I don't know, XYZ at the community. There could, I think relatively easily, there could be information included about a resident engagement committee or whatever you would call it. But I'm not sure if that's what you were going for, if you were looking for something more specific.
Well, I think I'm just thinking about like, instead of a resident engagement committee, like I just want to, like it's more than a community building group and it's a decision influencing and negotiating body. Obviously, like, yeah, so just
Yeah.
Andrew, do you want to chime in?
I don't know if this is
Okay.
exactly what you were talking about, but by ordinance, all renters had to be provided a certain packet. It includes the state's tenant rights guide, voter registration, the non-discrimination ordinance, and some other
Like the
things.
lead stuff.
Yeah, there's a,
Yeah,
there's
your landlord could be fined if they don't give it to you. So
Mhm. And I know that there's that, because I was gonna say, like, I would love for there to be that as part of it. And then also even specific information about the city, like city
Sure.
council, what ward you're in, a lot of
Yeah,
that
like municipal
information.
literacy, kind of.
Yeah, so I would love to see that as part of that too, as further engagement within that. And I think that in terms of how to get it to all of us, you could send it to Andrew, right? And then it can come out to all of us, or you can send it to me, right? Can I send it out to everyone?
yeah, I would prefer that you send it to me and then I can provide it to the full committee, and then the committee just wouldn't respond to that email. They would just review it before the next meeting.
Yeah, so we can do that.
Okay, so, go ahead.
Just thinking about what you're envisioning for the committee, one missing component seems to be the ability to provide feedback to the developer and the management company.
Yeah.
Is there a
Could I share a couple thoughts on that, Chris? Because we did start to talk about that a couple meetings ago, and I can't remember who all was there, but a structure that so specifically our director of asset management shared with me that she has implemented before is, and she called it a resident engagement committee, but here's how they operated. So there were several members from the community, several residents from the community on this committee. In addition, so that the committee is comprised of people from the community, but there's interfacing with the property manager and with an owner's representative. So somebody from the developer owner. And on a regular cadence, typically it was monthly, how she described it to me, that group would meet for kind of a, so first of all, any property level communication that needed to happen, we're washing all the windows, there's going to be a roof repair, so everybody know there's going to be noise. Any of that communication took place. And then the residents are part of the group that's responsible for helping disseminate that information and making sure that other residents are apprised of that information. But also part of that meeting is for the residents to bring concerns, complaints, questions, whatever they may have to that committee, and they have a direct line to the property manager and then the owner's representative during that meeting as well. So it results in accountability among everybody because everybody's involved in it, and it's not and kind of all three of those groups are represented on a regular basis. Now there's more communication that happens kind of offline, if you will, but there are regular meetings that take place to make sure that there are always the touch points that are happening.
And then how are those people identified who are on the committee? I mean,
Yeah.
the residents, I mean specifically.
Understood. Yeah. I believe, although I admit I didn't ask this question explicitly, I believe through some sort of a resident vote, some sort of an appointment and vote type system. And obviously you have to establish things like how long are people's terms on the committee? How are they nominated? How are they voted on? So some of that we'd have to figure out what this group would want to see. And I'd be happy to try to dig down a little bit more on that, but I think it's a committee selected by your peers is kind of the idea.
Can somebody from staff comment on how this works at Chittersburg? You know,
No,
I'm not familiar with it. So I don't think that there is a robust way of doing this in any of our properties. Housing commission properties included, they feel like they're not heard often when we go there about different things. Which is why I thought it was a great idea, and having that touch point is accountability. It's a really important piece.
Can I bring up the size of this committee? I'm looking again at the plans that you provided us on March 3rd. And I'm imagining so there's 5 different separate buildings in the family project. So maybe, some of those are 36 units, so that's still a lot, but I would think that at least 5 sort of representatives from the family project. I think it would be difficult for somebody, I think that makes sense at this sort of scale in terms of having the relationship that you would need to have in order to effectively feel like you could communicate what your needs were. And then at the senior project, it's kind of an H shape, which could be divided roughly in half, and there are 3 floors. So if you had 1 representative per half of that, floor plan, so that might be 6 representatives from the senior project. That would be.
Can you just say the number again for the?
So six representatives from the senior housing project and 5 from the family housing project. Roughly, this is just like me looking at if I was living there.
The seniors more than the family? Is that what you're saying?
Seniors is more than the family, just because that's what I thought of in an easy break. I don't think it would need to be more. Honestly, there's 4 more units in the family project. I think it might make sense to have more representatives for the family project. Also, seniors tend to have a lot of time and willingness to advocate for themselves in civic manners. So it might not need.
Yeah, maybe just 6 and 6 or something like that.
Yeah. And I don't know, how you break that down among, I said 5 just because there's 5 different units in 5 sort of separate distinct buildings in the family project.
You should pick an odd number so there's not tie votes.
Smart.
and just the more complicated you make it, the
Yeah.
harder it gets. When you look at city council, when we try to do things proportionally by ward, we're not a very large size community. We don't have a huge population, and we have 20,000 people, and trying to get 9 members from different wards on one board is almost impossible.
And I would also say too, there's no way for us to I think that sounds, I like the number, but assigning it sounds overly complicated.
Oh, I just thought having 1 person per building would be easy.
I think I think it could be, but I think it's something that we shouldn't bind now because it's not our decision. So we could set it up to say here's a
11
few
members.
suggestions with how this should run, or what we think, or the mission statement that we would pass on to them, and then people could fix or change it. But I think determining which building people come from should be a residential decision.
Okay. I was just envisioning, if I was living here
Yeah.
and I wanted to have this, to be able to talk to a representative and have my
A building rep.
it would make sense to me to have a building rep, because it would be somebody who I would have a chance of running into and having an organic relationship with in some context outside of me having an issue that I needed help with, which I think is so valuable, but I don't need to like have that be mandated in the language. I'm bringing this up for the purpose of saying, does having like
I
11
mean, I like
people
that
seem,
Yeah, I like the idea of a building rep. And
Yeah,
like,
maybe
you
it's
know,
about using
thinking
that
about-
language in it and then allowing for if that's what people want.
yeah, and then if people decide that that's, there's a building where there's nobody lives in any of those 36 units that would want to do that. They wouldn't be penalized for it, but presenting that as a suggestion, but does,
Building rep and about 11 members from community.
yeah, and does that seem like, how does that square with, Kyle, the resident engagement committees that you are aware of in your projects? That's a lot of residents to get
Can I
together.
ask a quick
It's a lot
question?
of residents. I was gonna suggest maybe 5 people per project, per development, not because these would need to be run separately.
That's my
And-
question. So these would, just to pause for a second. So it would be 2 different groups, essentially, 2 different kind of negotiation
Well,
councils.
Yes, although they will be, although these developments will in some ways feel like one large development, they will operate separately. One of them has an age restriction, one of them they have different standalone amenities, they will operate separately. So I think the committees have to be separate.
Okay.
And I think what some of the comments that you've heard about size of committee is right. I think it's going to be hard, especially at the family one, to get a large number of people. It could be that we say there's a goal number, but it's, I don't know, each community will be different in how well they take this up. So as long as we can have some flexibility in the final number, but I think 5 is probably even a little bit ambitious. I think it's achievable, but it's probably ambitious.
The only other thing for that is I just would like to identify a youth seat. So as long as it doesn't have to be filled, I know we have youth seats in the city that aren't filled, but yeah,
Yeah, plus
you-
youth seat, yeah, I
Yeah,
like that
yeah.
idea.
on the family one, of course.
Yeah.
Somebody under 65. Youth that-
Uh-huh. Great, that's great. That was very thorough, so thank you for that too. You all are knocking down all the things, so I guess if there's other other things, I mean, obviously the formation is its own accountability piece, so thinking about kind of a period for formation time. And then I also have on here, like the number that you see, and then the funded, so setting kind of something for that, and then also maybe coming back and talking about what would be in this tenants guide. A little bit more too.
Can I just get a little clarity on the funding? Are you imagining that being like money that could be used to print flyers to distribute to residents? Is that like, how, can you speak more to that?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that all the way. I just know that when from just doing so much free labor that I care about and I choose to do, I just know that it can be really helpful if you have like $1,200 to spend on whatever you choose in the first year. So you want to have a party and you want to encourage people to like participate. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
like
for a party or
community
something. Yeah. it's just
Bonding, maybe.
Community what?
I said community bonding,
Yep, or
Yeah.
even,
or to do, as you're saying, flyering.
yeah,
Okay, cool. That sounds very important.
Do you have a number in mind? Like for a budget?
yeah, I was wondering, what I wanted to talk about was both scope, like how, like, I don't know if it's doing a disservice of like having it for 2 years and then not having it. So I don't know what makes sense in terms of like what's realistic to sustain or unrealistic to sustain. And then why does it end if it does end? And then how do we explain that in the process of like, okay, well, we said it was okay for 5 years, but then you guys have to figure out if you need money. So maybe it's just like a start, like this is just an inaugural $2,500 for the first year to get it going. I would be happy with that, and then that kind of binds it. What do other people think? But I'm open, more elementary in this conversation.
So would this be funded by fees after that from tenants, or what's the source of the?
I guess if that's something that the tenants wanted to do, and if the committee was serving them, they could vote on that. $1,000 a year for, how long is this pilot program suggested? Like, I don't.
30 years.
It seems to me like $1,000 a year in a development like this could be like, one round of getting your grass trimmed. I don't know how much anything costs at this scale, because I live in a tiny house, but is that not a pretty good deal to maintain and help maintain strong tenant and management owner relations, giving them $1,000 a year to have a couple parties?
I like the idea of building it in for the life of the agreement, rather than relying on user fees. I just
Yeah,
find that to be an
I agree.
unsustainable way to do it. In 5 years, you'll be wondering how this is gonna keep going, and it might be useful, it might be something people really wanna see, but you can't rely on the user fees.
Yeah.
$1,000 a year is the financial burden that's impossible to meet. And it would actually cement this thing for,
Yeah, I like that.
years.
And then if they
Another thought I
wanted to work funds, they could have fundraising if they wanted to
To supplement it.
supplement that.
Another thing I was just gonna say too, in terms of like how the money's used, that's another kind of thing that the committee could go through a process to decide. And they could even go through, they could decide to do like some kind of participatory process, right, with the residents decide how that's used. So, yeah, so it could be kind of.
Yeah, and it can be like whatever, if it's like open accounting so that the community knows and every year it's published what it was spent on or something, so, and that feels more comfortable. I think something like that's not unreasonable.
Would we like to include officer positions, suggested officer positions in the language that we provided this committee so that they would have, no?
No,
we barely.
I would say
wanna
no
do
to,
that.
no, we don't, I think like the least.
I'm
amount
sorry,
of-
we're all anti-hierarchy people here.
I mean, I'm all for leadership, I'm
I'm gonna give a
But I'm all for
treasurer, that's
leadership.
why, if we're giving them a budget.
I feel like they can kind of come up with that, like, I think.
Yeah.
I think people will figure that out.
Somebody is gonna come in there and say, we need a treasurer.
Yeah, somebody be like, I got the budget, I know how to do spreadsheets.
Yeah,
I
I think
think,
those
I
things are.
would, yeah, I would say.
doable
we
and you
do.
can just, yeah.
So I would just wanna, okay, go ahead. We have, yeah,
As the discussion progressed, it led me to be thinking about the difference in the nature of what the traditional city council does and what the city manager does, and how what we're looking at kind of covers both realms, and it's up to the committee to decide whether you want to be doing both realms, or as council does, they set policy, they set law, but then when it comes down to the implementation, it would be if the city manager here at the city. And the parallel could be in the terms of the tenant committee, what things you would leave to the tenants to figure out themselves, that may have the same view that you do, may have a different view based on where they have come from and what is there at the time that all happens. I don't know if that makes it easier or more difficult to come to a consensus on what you want, but you may not want to give too much detail of which the tenant committee could find cumbersome. But if that detail is important, then you may want the detail. Just some thoughts. Sorry.
Thank you.
no, that's helpful. I think it would probably be good So like when you were saying that you said funded to do X, Y, Z, like maybe it'll probably be good for us when we get to that, like, I think we're kind of pulling some of that together now in terms of language, but maybe to say like, here's some starting tenets of what you might do. And then one of those will be like, to determine your own mission or, whatever, but we can kind of lay out like what will be some of those first steps in terms of the openness of what this space could be, but that they can then determine some of that.
And then I just want to ask before we move to another topic, if there's anything that I can research in between now and our next meeting that people would like in this theme or want to know about, how can I help answer our questions?
I'm interested to see the resources that you already have in mind, and I feel really good about what we've talked about here, and I wanted to get a sense of how we prioritize this as a group. So if we can just get our little fist of 5 in terms of how we feel about kind of working this out and this as a piece here. So.
John,
It's okay, John.
show me the, how many figures priority.
Oh, yeah. I'm still at 3.
Okay.
Great,
Got it.
thank you.
I just want to throw this in before we move on from this topic. I would like us to consider maybe us as a group providing a vision statement for this committee, and then they could write a mission statement. That might be too like nitty gritty, but that kind of stuff can be very like cumbersome and bogging down, I think, early work. And it might be helpful for us to provide some information for these resident committee members about just like how much we want them to be able to do. Because I think it could be very easy for them to get in a room and imagine that their roles are much more limited than I think we are envisioning. So just setting the tone for them of this being a group that is maybe unique in the amount of influence that it has. And then letting them go from there so that they start with open minds about what they could possibly do.
Yeah, that's helpful. Can I ask you to maybe work on that, or maybe Lisa, or if you would?
I can definitely, yeah, I just wanted to, so it's the.
I can also help work on that if needed.
It's in Boston. The mission statement is the Dudley Street Neighborhood
Oh.
Initiative.
Oh, you're bringing tea.
Really? Or was this something that I should have known about a while
No,
ago?
I mean, I know about it, but I live there.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And it's a community land trust.
Yes, so that was where I got it from, right? And this is not the situation, like, that's not in the. We can't do a community land
Yeah.
trust, obviously, but
This isn't that.
they had a really good mission
Mhm.
for why they exist as an initiative, yeah.
Cool.
Wait,
I'll send it.
so we have multiple volunteers for that. Who would like to kind of come back with some vision language that we can use as we flesh out the language next time? Or could do it and maybe send it to us ahead of time through Andrew, send it to Andrew, not to us.
What if we had maybe a couple different ones?
Okay,
Shouldn't we allow the residents committee to decide what their own vision is rather than telling them what their vision is?
I mean, can we provide a vision and then they would write their mission?
Here's what I would propose is, I think the best thing we can do is create like a menu of suggestions from based on our experience, so that they have something to pick up if they want, but not put it in place.
mhm.
So for instance, like,
And maybe resources. that they-
yeah,
Yeah, I just want, what I would like to avoid the suggestion is coming from a place of wanting to avoid them getting together in the room and then whoever is there, not to speak ill of property owners or managers, Kyle, but having somebody else who's there in the room, maybe limit, telling them some things about what they can and can't do that aren't necessarily true, but because they haven't decided what they can and can't do yet, but are limiting the imagination of the group in the very early stages.
And so
Yeah,
for
I
them-
also imagine that it could feel, oh, sorry.
No, please go
Would that
ahead.
even be legal? Could we?
It could also just prevent like, it could feel, I don't necessarily want to speak for them, but I would feel overwhelmed approaching like, I would feel maybe a little overwhelmed, like thinking of things that, or like trying to figure out what the intended purpose of this committee is, especially if I was one of the first people on there. And I totally don't think that we should necessarily be prescribing what they should do, but I think presenting them, like, I think it was Lisa who said like a list of options or even just a list of ideas of like, here's what this could look like. You should decide for yourselves.
A statement of inspiration, not a vision statement or a mission statement,
Statement of inspiration.
non-binding.
I like that. I was just trying to look and see if I
Just don't
could
know
read it
how you
out.
put this in agreement. That council approves.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. All right, are we good? Did you all have something else? I don't know. I'm just looking down to the. He hasn't stopped me yet. Okay, good. So we'll move on to the next one. So,
Is John okay? John went.
He's had issues with his internet every meeting.
Okay,
So normally about halfway through, it ends up logging out. I don't know why. And he sent Anderson messages typically, but we.
Okay,
it
cool.
is-
I just wanted to bring that up.
So they have to have a residence committee.
yeah, maybe he'll come back. I won't go to the one that he wanted to talk about, until maybe he comes back unless we get through everything else. So let's see here. So Steve, we had a couple. Well, no, we already talked about electric. Oh, well, the things I had you by was checking in with Ron and Recycling Ann Arbor about the recycling pilot for large multi-unit households. Okay, and then the other one I had was around the easement agreement for Penn Park.
When I talked to Kyle about that. I haven't been-
And then, but you thought you were doing something around the appliances, so I had here, maybe, I kind of thought that that was maybe a thing Kyle was gonna look into.
I think we were both doing some digging, Desiree. I think you're right. I think we were both looking at it.
Okay,
The electric appliances. so.
but did you have something for that, Steve? That you
I
want- No, okay, so. Kyle, let's jump to then what you have, because you also had, I had you talking about like targeted promotion. And then, yeah, and then this.
Yeah. So, my notes are a little bit out of order. So targeted promotions is something that we can do. But as you heard from, I believe, the city attorney last time, and Joe chimed in as well, it's something that we have to be careful about how we execute. I don't know how we, my biggest question is, how do we put something like this in the agreement? So I'm happy to agree that we will do a local Ypsilanti only, or whatever we kind of decide is the right area. Initial targeted promotion for these units before we do a more general opening. But I want to make sure that we don't do that in a way that we don't put something in this agreement that's not going to be helpful or is going to be like counterproductive. So I would like to ask Mr. Barr if he has thoughts on that. I think the intent we can do, I just don't know how to ink it.
So I'm scheduling a meeting hopefully early next week with the Fair Housing Center in Washington. I forget their official title, but I just actually sent me about the meeting to schedule it for a couple of things happening in the city, because I want to get their opinion as they're the experts. And so I will know more by our next meeting on this particular thing, because the last thing we want to do is require developer to do something that's illegal. Right? I don't think we can even do that. But we also want to make sure that anything we do is above board in every way. And from what I've been told, the Fair Housing Center is actually open to target marketing and things like that, but we just have to make sure that if we do it properly. And so I will have much more on that. I've been working with Teresa at Washington County in order to help do this for all of the projects we have going on right now. And so
So we're gonna now transfer the thing from Kyle to Joe.
I will take that on as far as what the.
Thanks. Only because I don't want to. I want to be. I just want to make sure that we put the right language in the agreement. So. Thanks, Joe, for helping, because I'm not sure of the exact language. But what I will say is, and I know we have a long list, so maybe we can leave this one here today. The intent of what I think this group wants, we can do. I just want to make sure that we properly record it.
So, can I just get a sense of where folks are in terms of your priority for this, like our consensus around targeted promotions, how much we want this to be worked out? And I would say too, like, I'm interested in thinking about it. I would think about the area, not just the city. I would think about within the township or surrounding areas related to the opportunity index, maybe. I would maybe think about the opportunity index as a way that we can think about where it would be targeted or, for the promotion area.
I just missed Alice's vote for that one. Priority for that one.
It's not a vote.
Sorry, I thought I saw. I saw Desiree too, so, all right. 4. I think Desiree, you were 5 as well, right? 4, okay. And then Alice. Did you have a priority for this one in terms of like 1 through 5?
Mr. 5, Alice.
I don't think. I think.
Oh, Alice
you guys, you're being remote. It's a little muffled, Alice. They're asking you for your fist to 5 on the targeted promotion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. 3-ish, 4.
Thank you.
Okay, and so did you have anything else around the appliances, Kyle?
So I think where we left it last time, Councilmember Wilcoxon was going to look into some of the kind of area goals and programs. And here's what I can say about the electric appliances. I've spent a fair amount of time talking with the construction team. I guess over the last, it's like just been a week now, but a couple things. First of all, as I explained last week, we have almost all of the appliances in the building will be electric already. The exception is your furnace and your water heater. Even the furnace, just for clarification, typically would have a heating. It's a combination unit in a building like this, typically called a Magic Pack, and it has heating and cooling. And the cooling is electric, the heat is gas. So it actually runs off different utilities, but regardless, it does add a pretty substantial cost to go totally electric. And what I was trying to figure out was how to potentially implement some solar power to help offset that. The problem is that's like a 4-month engineering exercise. It's not something that I can just sit here today and say like, oh yeah, we can do it, no problem. And in fact, I think based on so Joe, I started talking with your consultant, as well as I have another solar consultant that's more regional. He does work in other states. And both of their initial feedback when looking at the building was, you're gonna be bumping up against just available space for panels, and you're not going to be able to create enough solar to offset the added cost. There could be some benefit, but it's not going to be like close to 100% of the added cost. So that's to say, I've done a week's worth of sort of peeling back the layers. And to me, it's not obvious that we can get there without a pretty detrimental cost to the project. So that's where I am today. And of all of the things that we're talking about, we talked about probably a dozen or so items. on this grid last week that are priorities for the community. There aren't very many that you're going to hear me tonight talk about, at least I don't think, based on what I know, talk about that we are going to have trouble doing. And I think this is one we might have trouble doing. But I want to hear what Councilmember Wilcoxon has as well. And so maybe we'll go there next.
Right, so the thing that I was thinking is there's a new development at County Farm Park in Ann Arbor, where they're selling basically townhome style development where the entire everything is electrical. So I was going to talk to them about how they managed to make that affordable, but given where the development is and the price point, it's going to be very different than what we're looking at. So,
Yeah. So how about, oh, wait, we're getting.
I was just gonna say, I think there are some affordable units in there, but they're subsidized by the market plus units partially, market rate.
So I wanna, so now that we're at this point and like even with some of the other things, if we could go ahead, we could prioritize where we are. And then that could like determine, I think, what further investigation to do in some of these areas. So for instance, so electric, so we have kind of where it is now. How much would folks prioritize trying to have it be fully electric with the furnace and water heater as part of a benefit? So where are folks with wanting to kind of push for that?
I would, before we do the fist of five, can I just say that I would be equally interested in something that was built into this that said every year the residents get an energy efficiency survey of their apartment free of charge. And then there's things like, I know it's not just about saving energy either, but also like, so then there's energy efficiency interventions if possible. They can be relatively simple. We're not talking about like redoing things, but completely, but like, not that everyone has to have it, it's not mandatory, but it's available to you free of charge every year. And then maybe it's like about making the windows warmer or stuff under the door. And I know that's quite a different scope, but
It's like the kind of thing that like, for instance, like DTE or something comes out like for if you own a home, but I think even for renting, I think I had them when they came out and did like an
an
assessment.
energy efficiency, yeah.
But having that be like a program that can be run through the property management.
Yeah, and then we don't have, I promise not to get into the weeds with this, but it would be wonderful then too, to have like opportunities for, hey, here's all these free products from 3M this year or something, or I could see like some, a way for the community also to contribute to making these, to the materials that it takes, because those are usually, a lot of those are disposable if it's just year by year.
When you said that, that just made me think about like the light bulbs and if they're like the most efficient, like light bulbs, like what kind, like,
In the apartment building,
yeah,
it'll all be LED lighting, 100% LED efficient lighting, yes.
yeah.
And then the last thing about this too is just also for the air quality assessments. I just had a question too. I'm sorry, I should have added this earlier. I didn't think about it, but for things like, so we're in a community that has high levels of radon. So I know that like the people on the third floor are not going to need much radon mitigation, but if you're on the first floor, is there, I know that it's not mandatory for landlords to do that, but is there something like that we can put in there too about radon testing and air quality? So not just like once at the beginning, but some sort of annual or biannual, some package around air quality.
Well, you can do radon mitigation up front, yeah? Can't you do that?
Well, I guess that's a good question. Kyle, yeah, do you guys, is that something that you do, radon assessment? I guess it's hard to do before you actually build, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like in the basement.
So it depends on the building and it depends on some factors. What I actually have more experience with in multifamily with like vapor issues, which radon is one of them, is when we're cleaning up a contaminated site, which this isn't. And we install a vapor mitigation system that it's basically a radon system that pulls any sort of potential hazardous vapor and, routes it out the roof of the building. So I actually don't, I'm trying to think of all the projects that we've done new. Have I ever done just a radon system? And I don't know that I have. So I need-
Will these have the system that you just described? Oh, no, because you said that happens
They're
when
not-
it's uncontaminated.
They're not planned to have a vapor mitigation system. Well, for start, yeah, they're not planned to have a vapor mitigation system because there's no soil vapor contamination that's been identified. If something
Gotcha.
were unearthed during construction, then yes. But we don't have any vapor concerns.
Okay,
I think this, I'm glad you brought this up, because I know like a lot of our houses, I mean, maybe it's because like a lot of them are old, but I think a lot of the houses and areas in Ipsy, that this has been something that has been necessary to add. So maybe it's worth like checking into that, Kyle, like in terms of radon mitigation. And maybe like for me, like when you brought those things up, like I would personally prioritize more like thinking about air quality and like air quality assessments and energy efficiency. So that there's continual checkpoints on those over electric furnace and water heater. So that's like personally, like I would prefer those over that. So I appreciate you kind of lifting that up within that, but maybe we can separate those out. So if we can say for the furnace, electric furnace and water heater, where people are priority, and then we can do this package of things that you're talking about separate.
Okay, can I ask a question of Kyle? Oh, wait.
Go ahead.
No, Allison, go first.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that I think we still have some stuff to get through, or like some other items I think to prioritize. And because we did talk about how we only have one more meeting, although Taylor proposed to perhaps have an additional one after that, it might be worth like I'm noticing that we're giving Kyle a lot of tasks to do, which means a lot more new info for us, which would then probably pull us into more like decision making and more like weighing the pros and cons of stuff. And it might be more in the interest of our time to focus more on prioritizing stuff rather than more info gathering. But that's just a thought that I'm having. I also don't want to stifle the impulse to get more info, which I think is good. That's all.
And I will say, like, I do have an internal clock to pause us both to talk about the question of another meeting or not and things like that. So I will make sure we come back to that.
Can I ask my question? And then I'm fine with prioritizing this also as it is, because I don't, yeah, my question for Kyle would be for you to please investigate with your people the possibility of what it looks like to build this project with gas heating and build it in such a way that it could be when it comes time to replace those water heaters and computers, make it easier to replace them with electric furnaces and water heaters, because I assume that the cost of that is going to continue to go down as the cost of natural gas goes up, which it has been doing. So is there a technique that you guys can make that easier?
That to be future proofed, to go 100% electric, if that's your question, the building will already be constructed that way. I'm just thinking through it in my head. There's nothing that would preclude us from installing. So to go from gas to electric is a lot easier to go from electric to gas, because we're going to have electricity throughout every one of these units. You're going to have outlets in these furnace closets, for example, and water heater areas. And even if not, to add an outlet is very easy. To start adding gas lines in a building, go the other way, is incredibly expensive and onerous. You end up ripping up concrete slabs. It's a mess. But so this will be electric future proofed, just the way that it's already built.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so electric appliances, how are folks feeling on that? For the furnace and water heater?
1, 4, 4, 1, 3.
All right, and then in terms of the energy efficiency, air quality assessment, kind of things that Lisa was proposing, where are folks with that?
5, 5, 5, 5, 4.
Okay. And then, and then in terms of, I'm just gonna go back, even though we didn't get more information on this, but this might help determine how much more information we need. So the recycling pilot for the large multi-unit households, how are folks prioritizing that in terms of whether we still want to get more information on that?
5, 5, 4, 3, 5, 3 5s, 1 4 1 3.
No,
2 5s.
2 4s.
2 5s, 2 4s.
Alice changed her mind. I think she lowered it a little bit.
2 5s, 2 4s, 1 3.
So Steve, what I'll say for that is I think there's enough interest that we want to hear about that cost
And I
projection.
will send this through Andrew before that.
Thank you. And then for the easement agreement, where are folks for that?
That's something I would do.
Okay, so you're gonna do it anyway, but that's something easy. I think Kyle, you said that you think that that's already included,
Yeah,
so
Can I just
maybe
understand?
we can,
yeah. I do want to clarify. So at the last meeting, I was thinking you were talking about an easement that we're already including. I was incorrect, and Steve corrected me after the meeting.
Okay.
But I don't have any. This item can be included. It's not a big deal. So if you guys want to include it still, it's fine.
so
And I
how
think that
about
probably certain people
for
in the city
this
would
one,
like to see it.
maybe we
so.
don't have to really discuss it that much more, but then Steve, if you want to just come in with language for it.
Sure.
That way it doesn't have to take more time. Yeah, Steve with language. Okay. Great. And then, the other thing I had, oh, wait. Lisa, I also had corridor beautification along the forge. I'm sorry, I missed that. Did you?
That's okay. Let's see. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So what I was thinking was, I didn't get a chance to go and walk, but so I don't have a lot on this except for an assessment. So what would go there? Like, is there enough garbage cans? Do the bus stops over there have shelters? I guess I was thinking about using from that area down to like Stickies or to the EMU, to the IHA urgent care, or taking that area to the bus stop. So providing more garbage cans and pickup was really one of the major things that I was thinking about. And then also, the bus stops I had in mind, but I didn't get a chance to go see exactly which ones. Like I only know the one that I use on right there. So I don't know what they are up like with La Forge. Babbling about that, sorry. And then also thinking about, the one thing I was curious in beautification sort of is there any way to get money to put up signage that explains a little bit about the dam project? Because I would love folks around there to be like, have opportunities to build literacy around like what's happening, what we're doing, how it might affect that area. So I was just thinking about the signs that we have like by the river that says don't eat fish. Is there something that could be there that says, hey, did you know this is happening? Hey, did you know you can get more information here? So I kind of didn't do much on that, but I can do more on the beautification. I wanted to also talk to the city and see like what's realistic. I don't want to be like redesigning La Forge Road and then none of it's realistic. Not that I would
Can I just-
redesign it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that those are good things to think about, but I don't think that you didn't do anything on it. I think you did.
Okay.
So like, thank you for thinking about those things. I also want to say that I think this might be an example where there's some things that we can say for within this, for the developer, and also some things that we could say for the city, because I remember that was something we talked about during an earlier meeting too, which could be would be thinking about like things that we want the city to also think about as part of development. So I feel like this might be something that could fall maybe within that space.
So then you mean like it might be funds that come to the city directly from the development or something that are earmarked for this particular
Or I'm
thing?
saying like, or it's like, hey, city, you have to pick up trash, you know, I don't, I'm just
Right.
saying like, there might be things that's more like the city would, that'll be part of what the city would do as part of beautification of the area. As well, like, so I'm not saying specifically, I don't know, because, but, you know, I'm thinking about some of the things like information about the dam project as an example.
Yeah. One concrete example, I'm sorry,
It's okay. Is the signage meant to be read by pedestrians or motorists?
that's a good question.
Is the location and the type of signage and what it looks like really
I
not?
was thinking pedestrians, walkers and rollers and,
It's just there's not a lot of pedestrians, I think, that use that particular corridor.
I think that
It's a driving heavy area just because.
yeah, but maybe you're right. I mean, maybe it's emphasized driving and there is something walking and also we don't have to spend a lot of time on that if people are not interested in that particular.
It could be signage at Penn Park too. I mean, like, it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be at the development itself, just stuff that.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking about, yeah.
And just to add to that about the sidewalk along Huron River Drive. There are some sidewalks on the Forge, but there's no sidewalks on Huron River Drive that are not on EMU's campus. We certainly can't ask the developer to pay for anything on EMU's campus or EMU. But that's a whole nother thing that I would say is not really the best. It would be a lot harder.
Yeah.
But the city also can't pick up things on the, I mean, there's so many rules and laws when it comes to a university campus, that's a problem. Granted, it'd be awesome to have a sidewalk along the train tracks, but that's once again, I think out of the scope of what the developer could ever pay with the bond funds that they have. But yeah, the sidewalk, and I'm Google Earthing it right now.
But we're already doing
One
that.
thing was,
What?
We're already doing that with the updates to Huron River Drive coming up in the next couple of years. We're taking a
Couple of years.
sidewalk all the way down from the
good.
road down to the apartment past Stickies and all that. That's a project that there's been several public meetings for.
okay,
And so that whole thing is gonna look different. And go to 3 lanes with 2 lanes with turn lane,
okay.
bike paths, and then there will be a sidewalk on the north side.
This is on Huron.
Right.
Okay, so like, I was thinking like LaForge might be, maybe there's like, and this may be a waste of time to talk about and put money on, but maybe there's like that stretch where it's the bridge and people like barrel down going from up LaForge down into Huron. I always see people walking their dogs, and so like, what about like just a gated, like a barrier on the side of the sidewalk? Yeah, just to protect walkers and dogs, because I definitely, but then also maybe.
I guess the concern, I don't think that part of the Forge is a city road, is it, Steve?
Before.
Yeah.
It is.
There's always a big thing about well, we have to get into a lot more of that. I thought that was county.
Going across the bridge.
Yeah, because that's not a city bridge.
Do you guys get any complaints about things from over there?
Oh, we get tons of complaints over at the LaForge Road.
About the road and the
Oh,
sidewalk?
yeah, all the time.
Oh,
Yeah, no, the
Speeding.
bridge is a city.
so maybe it's like
Yeah, 'cause
speed
we have
bumps.
to- We're budgeting for repair.
What about speed bumps?
Since Bonnie is no longer in my office, I don't actually think about road projects nearly as much as I should. And so I'm learning my blockage since I don't have Bonnie in my office.
To your point, I mean, if we're gonna have that sidewalk, and there's gonna be a lot of traffic, and there's the reason we're putting that in.
Yeah.
Increasing the number of garbage cans and recycling and things like that along there, because, if you walk along, I run with my dog through there, it's traffic.
Yeah, and then there's no garbage, yeah, because people don't have anywhere to put anything, you
And
know,
it's
like-
the idea that there's gonna be more people now because of this development there, right? That there will be more, the expectation is that there might be more pedestrians there.
Yeah, and I recognize too, like adding garbage cans means adding labor. So I also am curious about that. I guess I was a little bit curious about the city's perspective, like, so we add that, and then how much labor does that put on Yucca, or like what? I don't know if, I'm sure I have blind sides to that, so.
Well, they have to go out and do the collection in the park already.
Who does, wait, so
The
that-
city does the collection for the garbage
in the parks, right? What, that's why I see you at the Yucca, or no? I know, it's not called Yucca.
No.
Sorry,
No.
No, it is.
No.
it is?
That is
Okay.
actually called Yucca.
That's the water.
Do they do, oh, that's the water?
Yeah, you're thinking about.
They're water and sewer.
Just good.
Mhm.
So no, just the DPS goes out and picks up garbage in the
Mhm.
park and make them.
Okay. I just know that over the years, like, I know that I know there's a solid crew, but I also know that that's a smaller crew over the years of people and dealing with the city.
I would say that over the last 3 years, our DPS crew has gotten stronger, more people and much more nimble and willing to help. And I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, Desiree, it's not you're in the parks, like, they have been cleaner. We've had actually more maintenance, and it's not great. I mean, it's not perfect, but it is getting substantially better than what it ever has been. Our grass is getting cut, we have public recycling in downtown, like, and all the parks. Like, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So can I just highlight this one as something that we can, it's more, I mean, we might still wanna like have language around it, but that it would be more around things with the city and also like thinking about things the city's already doing. One of the things that you said that might be an addition is the barrier the barrier between the street and pedestrians
Okay.
in particular, right? And then,
Can I just comment to that?
uh-huh,
So there's a new, on Grove Road, there's a new path that goes.
On what road's it?
Grove Road,
Grove, yep.
they just opened up a part of the B2B, got upgraded, and there's a wider sidewalk
Uh-huh.
on there. And one of the things that Ron is investigating for that is to have a barrier
Good.
between
Great.
the sidewalk and the street.
Yeah, that comes closer, and people do the same, they kind of like,
So I'll bring this up in the conversation with Ron on other things.
great, thank you. Perfect, okay. I'm just making sure I signed. Okay, perfect, okay. And so the other things we have, I think,
Do it
Kyle-
prioritise that.
oh,
Sorry, I didn't see any Vista 5 for that, if we wanted to do it. The corridor beautification of the board.
well, I think that we definitely do want, but I feel like I was not doing it for that one because it's probably more city determined and not as much developer focused.
or maybe we need insight on that.
So community benefits ordinances are what the city decides they are. Like I said, in all of the research I've done, which there's not many, in Detroit, there's things that the city does, and there's things that the county does. No, sorry, it's in the city developer, and then there's also things the county could do. So this area on the Forge could be used for some program income funding that Washington County has. So there is funding from other sources that we could actually put towards projects like this. And we've always found it hard to actually properly engage this community. So the two places we could use for the income for Washington County is either this corridor or the south side. It's a lot easier for us to get into the south side and actually talk to many residents. As we've seen when we've sent out notices to every resident in this neighborhood, we still couldn't get an actual member, a resident to be on this committee. We tried actively.
And it's not a small amount of money from CDBG that is specific to that south side in this area. So
What
But,
was the acronym?
CDBG,
CDBG.
it's a,
but CDBG, you have to have proper public engagement with X number of people, and because it's extremely challenging to engage those two apartment complexes. Because there's no association, no group that we're talking about for this, it's almost impossible to get the proper engagement to spend those funding. So that's why we typically concentrate those funds on the Heritage Park neighborhood.
Theoretically, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna ask quickly, if this resident committee works and these projects are, the residents in these projects are engaged and engageable with, would this development itself be enough engagement from this area to be able to use that funding there, or do you need additional input from the other projects?
No, I think it would.
My response was gonna be 100% yes.
So then, in terms of the community benefit ordinance that we create, or the community benefits that we do, so then that language about the city is interested in investing in this, like XYZ goes into the CBO finale. Or how does it,
So we can recommend, you can recommend anything
Mhm.
the lawyer drafts up, and then council still has to approve it.
got it, okay,
And so they could pull it out, because they can amend any agreements.
okay.
My personal opinion.
Yeah.
Is that the city should be doing the same. And it shouldn't come
Yeah.
from these guys.
Okay.
It's a yes.
Okay, so that's in line, so we're good, that's in line with the city goals as well,
Mhm.
like where you wanna put effort and stuff.
So I like the idea of saying, like, alluding to that, yeah.
Okay.
Great. So we're at the time in our meeting where we need to decide if we're gonna extend the meeting. We have about 9 minutes left, so
How
I
many?
wanna start with that. 9.
Yes, I think we should extend the meeting until 9:30.
I'd second it.
All in favor?
I,
Aye. All right, and then the next thing I wanted to have us touch on before we continue with this piece is thinking about whether we are going to schedule another meeting or not. So I'll turn it to Teglin, just you brought this to our attention to see what you would like to propose.
So as the schedule for this committee currently stands, we have one more meeting. I believe it's gonna be on the Thursday, 2 weeks from now.
It would be 3 weeks.
It's on the 21st. 21st.
Yeah,
That's
two
two
weeks.
weeks, right? Okay. And at that meeting, we would be ideally at the end of that meeting, if this works, we would be as a committee voting to finalize our list of recommendations, which then goes to the lawyer to be written up and then presented to city council. Is that correct? Cool. So I pose to my fellow committee members, do we feel like we'll be solid on that by the end of another 2-hour meeting? Or if we would like to schedule an additional meeting. And I don't know what, I think we had until that Friday or Saturday, was like the end of the timeline.
Till Saturday, till the 23rd, I believe. I could be wrong on it by a day. But I believe it was the 23rd that we had to conclude our stuff.
Cool. And we're scheduled to meet on the 21st right now. So I know it's a busy time of year, and I'm sure that we've all only gotten busier since we made this calendar. And if we feel like there's not a time in the next 2 weeks, that's cool. And I think that Desiree is an excellent meeting chair and that we could get it done in a meeting if we needed to, but also this is the first community benefits process in Ipsy, and I'd like for it to be really good.
Yeah, I mean, here's what my first thought is that I would prefer to, like personally, I would probably prefer to just think of going into that next meeting, thinking that it might be 3 hours as opposed to thinking about it 2 hours. I also feel like we have, I feel like we're making really good headway and that we are pulling together these different pieces for accountability already as we're going. So I think it's gonna be really easy for us to turn something over to Mr. Barr, like personally, but we just have a couple more, I think, a couple more things where we had some information that is outstanding. I think this idea that John was suggesting, that might be another thing, but so anyway, personally, I think that we could do it. But I'm happy to see what other people feel about that. Lisa, what are you thinking?
I'm fine with either way. I'll go with whatever you all decided. It's fine with me either way.
So-
Alice, how about you?
Yeah, I'm in Lisa's boat. I don't have a strong feeling about it. Is there a reason or a downside to just deciding to have another meeting at the next meeting? Or is that not something we could do?
We have like the next meeting is on the 21st, and this process is supposed to conclude by the end of the 23rd, which is
It
Saturday.
would mean that we had to extend the whole process.
You could
So-
vote at that point to bring it for an extension to council at the next meeting, but the next meeting for council after that is
May 10th.
May 10th. So that's another 3 weeks after
And we also sent our schedule to everyone. I would say, honestly, for one, this meeting room is booked, I think, every night for the next 2, 3, until, we're gonna say till December, realistically, it's booked almost every night. I'm being a
Yeah,
little
I gotcha.
facetious, but through April and May, it's booked.
Wow, it sounds like we need another community space.
We would love another community space. I cannot express that enough. Especially not because we're paying for rooms, we really don't have to pay to have rooms like this, but we're paying for rooms throughout the city to try to have meetings that are safe and distanced. And place we used to use, you have to have vaccination requirements, you can't require that to go to a public meeting, a bunch of things. I would say, to go off of what Desiree had said, honestly, at our next meeting, 3 hours, and if we have to go longer, I mean, realistically, city council went for 5, 6 hours last night. We don't want that.
Yeah.
We don't want that, but realistically,
If we had to.
if we had to, there's not a time limit that you guys couldn't extend. And realistically for staff, like we have a lot of meetings.
Yeah, can I bring a pizza to the next meeting?
We can all chip in and order pizza like they did
that.
last
That
time.
happened last night. At 11
Yeah.
o'clock, we were all seeing the receipt.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. Let's put that, like, who's fist of 5 for pizza?
I'm gonna give my fist a five for that one.
Person.
Yeah, 10, fist to 10.
I know. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if that
No,
answers
that
that.
sounds, and when you said a 3-hour meeting, I'm like, okay, yeah, I think that if we are all committed to just like the next meeting, coming in prepared to like be there for as long as it takes to have something that we're all comfortable with, which I'm sure that we can do. And I don't think it will take necessarily 5 hours in one meeting.
And we're pretty close to having it all prioritized. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, there's a couple more things to hit on, and there's another piece of some more informational pieces we need to get from Kyle too, but that I really want to make sure we get to. Go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to ask Andrew if it would be possible to have a resolution ready for the April 19th meeting of council. To say, like a provisional resolution to say, if we don't finish what we need to finish on the 21st,
That we can extend.
that we can extend with agreement from COT. And so that way.
We're covered if we need to.
A little extra time and say, another meeting within 2 weeks. Okay.
2 weeks from that, so you're getting close to May 3rd and that Monday, so you can't use this room those 2 days. I won't be there.
I'll be there.
So.
So that's ballpark.
Yeah,
But I mean, around-
this body can pass a resolution indicating if needed, could you extend an additional 20 days? So I could draft a resolution for the 19th saying if this committee has not completed its work with this agreement, then it requests 20 additional days to complete its agreement.
I see Kyle rubbing his jaw.
Sorry, I'm looking at a calendar. Can you, Andrew, can you remind me, so when is the next city council meeting that this agreement could be heard if we wrapped the 60 days within 60 days. So say April 23rd, we're ready to go, or April 21st, we're ready to go. Is May 3rd a council meeting or is May 10th?
May 10th.
But I feel like there might be, well, how fast will you be able to work, Mr. Barr?
Well, he's answering that there also has to be a 15-day public notice to post before it can go to council.
And there's also the part where the city manager has to review this and, you know, it may go back to staff and like that. I doubt that would happen since you're all sitting here, but you know, there's that ambiguity for that.
Yeah.
I also think when you have the ability to extend, you typically will cut a meeting short, and when you have, it's like, when you have a deadline, you can meet it.
Right.
And if you have the ability to extend, typically it's extended.
No. Okay, go ahead. What is your turnaround time?
On our side internally, I would think a week would be fine.
Mhm.
That's by internally, I mean between our office and the city. Doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily mean that developers' attorneys have reviewed it,
Yeah.
but just for us, the legal structure outside of what you're trying to, accomplish and put into it, probably fairly simple.
I've got a question.
So just 1 second, and then Kyle, for you, in terms of your turnaround with your lawyers, what do you think that would be? But it seems like for the question you were asking, it seems like it wouldn't be the immediate next council meeting that it could be heard, given the noticing and everything with it.
Right. I don't think the 10th, I think you're right. I don't think that the 10th is I heard it wasn't likely, right? So then is it the 24th?
No, it's the 17th.
Oh, they're
It's the
back to
10th.
back.
It's
Yeah,
the 17th and then 7th of June.
See, okay, yeah. And we unfortunately, this is is inconvenient. We unfortunately have like a purchase agreement hurdle date on the 16th. So, which what that means is when you structure these agreements with a seller, you put down a chunk of money that's refundable for a period of time, and after that it's no longer, it's like when it becomes non-refundable. That date is May 16th. So originally when way back, I was hoping we would be done with this already, but then when we established this schedule, I was hoping we would be at the May 10th city council date to allow for us to know by May 16th if we have a project. So one, the prospect of extending makes that definitely impossible. But can somebody reiterate the notice dates? Did somebody say there's a 15-day notice period for the council meeting?
For the benefits agreement, yeah, so when this committee gets done, the lawyers draft it and the city manager okays it. Then there's a 15-day notice period in the ordinance. To
Calendar
where,
days? Calendar days or business
day.
days? Calendar days.
Calendar. So if we got done on the 21st,
You'd be able to do it.
and Mr. Barr got done on the 28th or 29th, and your lawyers signed off on it immediately, the soonest we could get would be to the 17th meeting. Like there's no other way to do it. And
We can't preemptively notice it without having the agreement actually drafted.
I think that would be a Mr. Barr, city council, and this committee.
Doesn't people need to be able to see it?
Include the agreement itself. I've never seen a notice include the
It
agreement.
does not.
Yeah, so hypothetically, you could notice it while the agreement's being formed between the lawyers.
We agreed not to extend it. We were gonna have an agreement.
But I also think that, people would need to be able to see it, to be able to give comment on it.
It would be ready in the packet. It would have to be ready by the
Which is
6th
like
at
the-
the very latest to get fit. And Andrew, actually, I have to channel my inner Andrew. It would have to be ready by the 4th, or else it's not getting in the packet. That's what I get told every council meeting. And so it all could be done. But extending it definitely.
Yeah.
blows out the water.
So I think I mean, I think that our goal is to not extend. Right, so, and then, I think that, so let's not worry about the preemptive language. I think that if we get to the end of that meeting and then we have to do something, then that's a whole nother, then that will be its whole other beast. But if we can try to stick to our time, to me, I mean, I want a really great, robust process and community benefits agreement. And to think about this process, I think that being able to try to get through it within a time for like us as community members, I think would also be a good outcome too. So yeah, so if we can try to figure that out, we're gonna have a pizza party, it's gonna be great, we'll figure that out how to do it.
As long as I know that there's an opportunity for us to eat and drink something with caffeine in it during this meeting coming up, I'm good.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So what I would like to do, just to jump back in, to keep us to our, so we don't have to extend again, if possible, yeah. I wanted to see, another thing that Kyle was gonna come back with was some calculations about the affordable units breakdown.
Yeah.
So we can do that now. I feel like we don't have to really prioritize. We already know this is like one of our top priorities of doing, so we could just mark it down. It's all 5 for all of us. So yeah, so Kyle, if you can just do that breakdown.
Sure. Let me, I'm going to share my screen. I think that's probably the easiest way, because I put, Andrew, if you could allow me to share. I put something together and I tried to keep this simple because what I wanted to avoid doing was putting like 17 scenarios on the screen because it's not going to be easy to filter through them. But I did something representative and then we can talk about that. And hopefully that can help guide the committee. So bear with me one second. You should all see an Excel spreadsheet. Can you see this and see my mouse?
Can you zoom in a little bit, Kyle?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Is that more legible?
We can all get up and actually
Hello,
look at
Bill. How many
it.
thumbs stand?
No, that's right. That's right.
If I go any wider, I'm gonna lose.
No, this
part
is
of
good if we just get up to look at it.
Let's see it firm.
There, that's well.
Something you guys can see here too. It's right there.
Okay, so
Get closer.
can somebody give me like a thumbs up? Maybe Mr. Barr. Can people see it? And are we okay?
Yeah.
Kyle,
All right.
everybody can see it and we're in a good place.
So I will explain, and sorry, I moved it. I will explain, and then let's talk. So the top scenario is what we all talked about last week and the week before, whatever, as the baseline that was proposed for a 5% pilot. This is the family project up top, the number of units within each unit type, at each AMI level, and then the associated rents at each AMI level, and then the same thing at the senior. Joe, you passed out a schedule that was a little dated. It had back when we still had 3-bedroom units in the senior. So
Yes.
I've just zeroed those out. So now these are correct. And what I was asked last week was 2 questions. One was, we had talked about a couple different scenarios where we could add 20 affordable units at some level, be it 40% or 50%, and what that pilot would need to become. And that's not reflected here, but I'm just going to reiterate that for people, and then I'll show what's reflected here. So last week, I explained that for every 20 units at 50% of AMI that are added, the pilot would need to increase by 1%. So in other words, go from a 5% pilot to a 4% pilot. If you wanted to add 20 more units, it would have to go to a 3% pilot at 50%. For every 20 units at 40%, you would need the pilot to go from a 5% all the way down to a 2%. So the question that was posed to me was, okay, can you say instead of 20 units at 40% or 20 units at 50%, what about 10 at 40 and 10 at 50? And then can you put them, what I heard was, can you put those all in the family? And I'll explain how this exercise is a proxy for a bunch of different things. So now here's new scenario. And actually, sorry, I'll leave this up so you can still see most of the top one. So I added 10 units at 50% and another 10 at 40%, all in the family building. And then I put the associated rents over here for 50% so you can see what those are. And what this ends up, I'm going to explain it high level and then I'll back up. It ends up basically being, remember before it was a 5%, or so we started with a 5% pilot. It turned into a 4% pilot if we added 50% units, and it turned into a 2% pilot if we added 40% units. I should have been able to just do this in my head. It ends up being a 3% pilot when you do 10 of 50s and 10 of 40s, right in the middle. It's a little bit skewed in this case, well, or the makeup is skewed because what ends up happening here is you're loading more deeply affordable units into the family project. So we'd have to figure out a way to say the family actually has to be a 1% pilot, but the senior stays at a 5, and the overall project that blends to a 3. And then within this, there's all kinds of different, there were questions about, can we weight these differently and make them more heavily weighted towards 1-bedrooms and 2-bedroom units? I talked with Mishta about that, and we do have some ability to do that. What I can't, just to back up, what I can't do is change the allocation of these initial 40% units, that the first 40% units that we had, the initial 16 and 15. Mishta is going to require parity for those because that's a, you have to score a certain number of points in Mishta to get your award, and that's a point scoring threshold. So I can't mess with those, but any of the additional ones that we're not talking about, we can weight unequally to smaller units if we want to. That was a lot of talking. I'll stop there. It's probably confusing. Let me know what questions you have, but remember, none of you are at a microphone.
So one of my questions, so I'm also wondering, like, if this is like kind of rounding. I was imagining that it'll wind up around like somewhere between 3 to 3.5% in terms of the pilot. And so I'm just wondering kind of how that's like rounded in that way, because and also thinking about like what that might mean in terms of dollars, I guess, for the city within that space. I don't know.
Can you explain the round? I didn't understand the rounding question. You're saying that the fact that it's a 3% pilot is going to be like a 3.1% pilot or a 3.2% pilot?
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering, because I was thinking, like, when I was kind of looking at it, I was thinking, yeah, it'd probably be around like a 3.5, somewhere between 3 and 3.5. And so I'm just wondering if like, it's kind of like, if you just kind of rounded it down to kind of 3. And I'm just trying to think about like whether it's worth it to think about how, like, what that extra like 0.5% or whatever can mean in terms of moneyed resources.
So
Yeah.
each percent, sorry, Kyle, I'm just gonna step in because I've done this math. Each percent of the pilot is about $40,000 to the city. So at 3%, we're looking at $120,000. So 1%, it's 40,000. At 5%, it's 200-ish thousand. At 10%, it would be 400-ish thousand. I am rounding quickly because it's obviously not exact, but I think that gives you a pretty good gist.
Yeah, so then like, yeah, and then that 0.5% would be about 20,000.
Can you just say that once more?
Yeah, so each percent is about $40,000
Okay,
based on the rents.
That's based on the static amount of rents, though, right?
Yes.
Whereas if you change the number of units, do you increase the rents? Sorry.
No, so you would change a little bit, but we're not talking anything drastic because it's based on the rents, and the rents aren't crazy, and I'm using a very, very overgeneralized, I mean, we can get into the weeds of an Excel spreadsheet, but I think it's kind of, when doing one of these exercises, each percentage is 40,000. So each percentage you take away is 40,000, each you add is 40,000.
And then also just to confirm, Kyle, so with the way you have the units are current, the ones that you added, the 50%, the 20 that you added. Right now, they're in here in the same kind of formula as you had before and not shifted in a way, yeah. Okay.
That's right. I just did it because it's not gonna make a big difference the pilot calculation, and I just didn't want to start guessing at what the weighting was. But what I wanted to report was, for example, these 50% AMI units. If you said we want this to be 811, for example, 811. That's something that we could do. There's not. I wasn't sure if there was a restriction at the state housing agency level. That's what I needed to confirm, and that can be accomplished. But I just picked a down the middle allocation or distribution just for conversation purposes today. I didn't want to get. There's already a lot of numbers on the screen.
Cool. Are there questions or things that folks have for Kyle based on this information? In terms of how you feel about wanting these additions at the 50 and 40% and the ways that that impacts the pilot to the city.
Was that a question? Or was
Yeah, I'm just saying, oh, did anybody have any questions about it or have any feelings about seeing this proposal and the way that those units would impact the pilot?
I guess my question for Kyle, this might be obvious, but if we were to, as a group, say this is the most important thing to us, would be getting, getting these additional, more affordable units, and we're fine with the 3% pilot. And we also want this list of other things we've been talking about. How would that make you feel about giving us a residential engagement committee and a free pantry and whatnot?
Oh, can I just jump in here?
Is that not an appropriate question to ask at this point?
No, I don't think it's inappropriate, but I just wanna level set and say that my expectation is that we're getting a lot of this list. Like I'm saying, like, based on where we're prioritizing, there's a lot of these things. So I just wanted to say, like, as my expectation is that it's not gonna be like just one or whatever.
Yeah, and that had been my expectation too, and I guess I just don't know if that expectation from the developer's point of view was based off of a 5% pilot, and if this is like, would be a big upset for you guys, in which case, like, start thinking about that now, but.
I mean, that means that they're paying the city less, so.
Teguin, if you're asking,
Developer, because the
Okay.
pilot's being changed proportionally.
Yeah, so for the develop, this is,
Better deal.
yeah, this is the thing, is like,
Doesn't
the
matter.
city is who's losing, like, money
Okay, well
by
then,
the pilot changing.
okay.
Which is why it's kind of like,
Never
well,
mind,
should we
Kyle.
push
I
it
don't-
to 3.5, just
See,
to
what do
kind
you
of.
guys think of this?
I would defer to our city council.
I don't think you're gonna get anything lower than 5%. I think enough people are having a problem with 5%.
I don't think people heard
Could you
you.
speak in the mic?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't really.
I think taking this any lower than 5% is gonna jeopardize this with city council, because I know there are people who are already not inclined to grant a 5%.
Based on the perceived affordability of the project, and the benefits.
Based on regardless of any of that. They're just like,
Mhm.
no.
Well, I would hope that they would, after we go through this process, actually take our consideration into their decision-making in terms of like who determines the benefit, and that this process is supposed to be helping to determine that.
Sure.
And as opposed to deciding, I mean, like I get, whatever, I've heard like whatever, but I do think that part of this is that we're trying to weight like what those benefits are and thinking about how do we, you know, and I know this came up before, and I think this was a point that Alyssa was making, right? In terms of that, this is a opportunity for us to have, and I think, Joe, you were kind of like, yeah, I think, but that this is an opportunity really to have a rent controlled space that will not be going up in the same kind of rates that we're seeing happening. And that comes with a balance, right? So anyway, so I will just say, and I think that as a committee that we should, you know, that we should think about how we make sure that city council is open to this, because that's also part of the process, is that they have to be open to the community coming forward with an agreement that is in full transparency and trying to balance all those things. So I think that that's something we should take to them. But I would, yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand like where council is on that, but I also think it's important that we don't let that stop us from getting the most of what we want out of this process. And if that means that the pilot might change because something that we think is really important needs to happen, then I don't think we should let that stop us.
Can the,
Oh, you're on.
can the, so if we do that, and then can council say, yes, we accept everything except for this 3%, and we're not gonna do it this way, and we'll take 5, or else nothing,
They can accept any part or
reject a
reject any
part. So just even if they reject that part, it doesn't mean we throw it all out.
Yeah,
Okay,
which is
okay.
why, I mean, you all voted
Okay.
5, like.
I'm just gonna
you're
put mine
not
in as
to-
a 4.
you're not to put your finger on the pulse if you all value that.
Well, I would say making sure that if that is what the committee wants, having it be an option, but not the only option, because sometimes I've been around for, some people probably think too long, but I've known when you give council one option, it could easily be an up or down. When you give them 2, it definitely helps to make, and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, there have been a number of options presented in the last few months. And I think it is, as we're saying with the other things where, you give them an inspiration and then they can follow through. But you're right, if you give them one option, it's up or down, and they don't always take the opportunity to amend it.
Mhm.
But if
Well, the other thing I think is important too is that y'all gonna get me in trouble up here because, I'm like, please, I think that it's about where's the good faith, who's operating under good faith, 1. And 2, what are the goals for what we're doing? And so for me, my concern, I mean, I think this is always a concern, but which is understanding that council can do whatever they want, because they do anyway. But what I would hate is that we go through this and we say our number one thing is making sure there's as many affordable units, and that they take that out, and then we're left with everything, everything else, which is great. I don't want to downplay the other things we're talking about. But I kind of don't want to get so stuck on that, because y'all know, but I do think that that's something that we have to think about. What is a different strategy? I think in terms of thinking about council, that's a different strategy than the conversation with the agreement with Kyle. I think that that's an additional strategy that, maybe we can talk about more at the next meeting, but I think it's really about getting more community members. And that's why once we get to the point we have an idea of these benefits, I think that we, that 15, like all of that, I would love to see us sharing, getting more people engaged. Like I was even thinking about this conversation about how the units can be weighted to maybe even I was thinking about doing like a poll or something, being like, hey, y'all, just to get more input on whether that, because I'm taking that off of like some information from already now a couple of years ago. But to see kind of where people would like to see that. So anyway, I just think that maybe it's about the community engagement and having that showing up so that council follows through with their part of the deal as well. But,
Just a 5-minute warning.
mhm. So yeah, anything else about these units, how this is drawn up? Do people feel good about this balance as it is?
I feel bad because I honestly, I do not understand it. But, and I apologize, I'm gonna do more research. I mean, I understand, Kyle, you know, the premise. I get what you're saying about like ratios and the impact on the overall pilot. I understand that. So I kind of defer to the rest of you. Yes, it is very important to me, but it does, I do agree with you that it, for like sake of, sorry, we have like 3 minutes.
Can I propose to extend our time for 15 additional minutes, but we don't have to use all of it if we don't want to?
I'll say.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So what I want to make sure is that, Lisa, you feel comfortable with what is being said, and Kyle can email me over the sheet, and I can actually sit down with you and go through this.
Yeah, can you explain it to me next week or?
Yeah, so, and
Okay.
before you leave, I'll schedule a meeting with you, put it on our
Okay.
calendars. We can do it through Zoom, we can do it in person, whatever you prefer.
Sure.
But I offer that to anyone in this group, and I can go over anything.
No, I need to, yeah, I would love that. I need to understand it better. I think I do, but I don't want to take more time being the one who doesn't get it. If I can sit down one-on-one with you, that's better for
Well,
this.
and actually, Christopher will be sitting right next to me because
Okay,
he can explain things that I can't, and also, so.
okay.
We try to work together. And I
Much
offer that to anyone.
appreciation.
Thanks.
I've got a question.
Mhm.
About getting more, first question, about getting more community engagement in this process to bring, is this something which you're envisioning, which I love, happening before the council meeting on the 16th? So what we're talking about? And would that be something that the city staff would do for us at our behest?
I was not thinking of that way. I was thinking about it being more of a community effort.
That we would lead?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah,
or random people.
random people who we find.
No, no, no. What are you proposing? I mean, I'm happy to like.
I'm not proposing, I guess that was just an assumption that I was making about, no, I don't have any expectations about that, but just like. what-
Yeah, I was thinking probably more informal, connecting with like our networks around some of these things and then trying to mobilize folks to join in efforts to like say to co-sign, you know, like, do y'all agree with these, you know, things like that.
And a related follow-up question would be, in terms of us presenting our arrangement, our agreement to council, assuming it's approved by everybody and everybody loves the 3% pilot language that we've written, all of us love it. Is, you know, like getting council to approve that, could that look like submitting, like, in addition to the legalese of the agreement, like a document that we write and approve as a committee?
Like a
Speaking
cover
about,
letter or.
yeah, exactly, being like, hey, city council, we know that you won't like this, but this is why we think that it's important. And, you know, and then like at the very bottom, you can put a footnote that's like, if you really absolutely hate it, you know, like, don't torpedo the whole thing because this project means a lot to us. So that's one option for engaging with city councils, or having us show up to city council in some way. I don't know what that looks like right now, virtually calling in, getting maybe people who aren't on the committee, and speaking our support in that way.
I would love, I mean, I think public comment, like that should happen for sure, but in terms of whether, one of the things I was wondering whether you're asking is whether our committee would be, have a space on the agenda, in terms of doing like a presentation of our findings. So Steve, thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. A couple things. One, when I was asked earlier about the opinion of council, I was referring to something I heard. And I can't say that it's a prevalent judgment.
Mhm.
And so in your, I like the idea of the cover letter and the presentation. I think that all needs to happen. But in terms of, starting from the negative with council, I think that the cover letter should just focus.
Oh,
on
for
the
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have us do that.
Yeah.
And as far as the survey goes, we can host one. We have a really functional website to do that. If you want really good participation and turnout on this, it would really, I think, require legs and boots on the ground to be doing a lot of that work promoting it.
I think
You can design it as much as you want. I mean, we're happy to support it.
because I don't think that we could entertain anything that wasn't done through the city as part of the evidence, right? So if you went out and you connected people and you came and said, well, most of the people I've talked to say this, well, that doesn't really help the decision making of the council. So if it gets designed, it gets put out, and you still go to your network and say, go here and do that, then at least we've got an official recording of it
Mhm.
that will make sense.
Okay. Thank you, Tegman, for lifting it up a little bit more, because then maybe that could be a way to make it more official, but, and it could be like a both and kind of process.
Yeah.
Is that what you were preferring? Yeah.
In terms of both, which of the both ends? I mean,
Well, both like something that would be like the city could have a process for engagement. And also that we would have to do some engagement on our own through our networks to engage with the city's process.
Yes. Yes, and a both and probably on a cover letter and ideally speaking to the city
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
the outcomes of that process.
Yes, I have that on our to-do.
Question about, so if we were to do this, to have a little survey. that
Oh,
would
y'all,
help-
wait a second, it's 9:30. Oh, wait, no, you extended, sorry, thank you.
If we were gonna have a survey that would help us get more information about the breakdowns of the additional affordable units, which is what the survey would be for. And we would be informing the design of that. I'm wondering how that works for us to do with you guys in a way that's legal in the time that we have.
As long as
I
you
would
have
like
a
to
quorum, we're fine. We can work one-on-one to develop the survey together with individuals on the committee.
Okay.
Great.
Um,
Is that something you would like to work on, Tegwin?
I could do it. You had brought it up, so I didn't know if you wanted to do it, but I also know that you've got a lot of stuff to.
We all do.
We all do.
Yeah, we all do.
Sure.
I can maybe, I was just probably thinking about it being a lot less formal than this, but I think maybe I could do it. Maybe we could connect on it.
And that's my question would Des and I be allowed to connect on making it?
Yeah, as long as we don't have quorum, so
Okay.
you and I could, yeah.
Okay,
So I'll put both of us on it, we can connect on it and then see kind of thoughts on it.
Cool.
Awesome. Awesome. The other thing, great, so thanks for pulling together that list, Kyle. If anybody doesn't have anything else to say on it, maybe we could take it down.
Yeah, stop sharing my screen. Sure, happy to.
I have one more question.
I forgot I was sharing.
It's not immediately related to. What would it look like for the outcomes of the survey to be integrated into the agreement? In terms of a timeline that we would need to have that information by.
So the agreement, I think the survey results might support different priorities of the agreement.
Well, the survey, I think we were talking about a survey that would just specifically speak to the,
Affordability component.
yeah.
There may be some other things.
Allocation, or what do you want to expand this?
I think, I don't know, like, I feel like, one of them was to say like, hey, like, do you all agree with our priorities? So kind of like favorability of some of them. and then specifically, I was thinking about like how we might think about weighting those, the units. So, I don't know, I don't want it to be too complicated, but I figure if we're gonna do it, we may as well be able to show like, yes, actually the community is behind these things and understands like that trade-off.
I think that's better in the presentation that you provide about the process that the committee went through to come to those determinations rather than in the agreement itself. But that's just my understanding of what the agreement might look like and how it fits.
It's gonna be really hard when you have spent the last 2 months working on this agreement. And then we prepare it to go to council, because that's the way the process is set up. And then you send out a survey saying, do you like our agreement? And if the community says, hell no, we have a much bigger issue where you do, because this is a representative democracy body. There's that, I think that you can do the survey on, should the city give up more tax revenue, more revenue or more affordable? I
Yeah,
think
that's-
that's exactly a survey that should be done to help guide council's decision.
Okay.
Please.
Especially if you feel strongly about it.
Yeah.
Public supports it, then you have another.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. So it can be much more focused. I mean, I think that that's the main question, I think, for me, is about that one and then the room. So, yeah, so we can make it much more focused, which I think is easier for folks to do because we won't be explaining all of the things and, in that much detail. So that's helpful, because that's literally the thing I mainly am wanting to get public support around. Great. So just in terms of the things that we have, the only other things that we haven't yet prioritized on our list are kind of talked about. One of them was around the staffing, the locally formerly incarcerated amount of permanent staff, which I know during the last conversation, we got an update about the permanent staff, which seemed to answer some questions. I will say that I did write my name down next to that. And, but I literally don't know what I was supposed to do and I didn't do it. So apologies, because you all came back with all the great information. And I don't actually know what I was supposed to do around that one. So I don't know if anybody else remembers what I was supposed to look up for that. Alice looks like she.
Yeah, I'm trying to scroll down to pull it up, sorry. Where did I put this? Oh, I didn't write down what you were supposed to look up, just that you were supposed to do it. I think maybe somebody had talked about you having connection or either connections or knowing more about how to reach folks that are re-entering from incarceration. I know the Many program might be interested, but that's the only.
Yes, thank you. I think it was maybe around thinking about language to make sure that it's not just available, but that there's specific outreach for folks who are formerly incarcerated, maybe. So I can still, okay, let me just write down actually what I'm supposed to do on that. Okay. I guess so. Let's and I would say in support, what are the systems for supporting folks? So I guess before I go do that, let's go ahead. So now that I know let's prioritize if there's other things too around staffing that we wanted to talk about besides thinking about either specific groups that we would want to name that aren't already covered and or language about what that outreach could look like. Is there anything else there? And then we can prioritize this area depending on where that is. I will either research or not, or I will either draw out language or not.
I would say that I would be most interested in the formerly incarcerated as opposed to local or.
Yeah, some of that language is already I would say, we could say statutory anyway, because within the ordinance, there's language around hiring, local hiring and things of that sort.
Okay.
right? Is that correct? Yeah. So I think that we don't have to regurgitate what already is gonna happen. I think it's just more about like additional. Yeah.
I would say formerly incarcerated and people who were charged with felonies, which would be an additional barrier.
Can I ask one question as well? Is there a pay schedule for employees generally, like the manager of the senior complex is going to be making X amount of year? Like, is there?
Is that a question for me? Sorry, I just.
Sorry, Kyle. Yeah, you can't. You can't see me looking at you.
Yeah, I
in the
can't.
video,
You're not making eye
apologize.
contact. Yes, the boy, I don't have it in front of me. I don't want to misquote, but I want to say that typically the maintenance staff, and I can confirm this, but typically the maintenance staff will make between $40,000 and $50,000 a full-time maintenance person per year, and then property manager will make more than that. They'll probably make 65,000 or something like that. And if you'd like, I can further clarify that, but those are the kind of the pay ranges.
Yeah, and I'm also curious about like the part-time staff. Is it hourly? I'm assuming it's not salary for part-time staff.
The assistant community manager.
Part-time, yeah, well, part-time staff would be hourly, but the way that this is structured right now, we would have I believe they were all full-time. All the people that we were talking about, the two maintenance individuals, and then the assistant manager and the property manager, those are 4 full-time positions.
Got it. Okay, I didn't remember that. Okay. And then my last question on this is, do they come with benefits?
They get benefits.
Health insurance benefits?
They get benefits,
Okay.
correct.
Okay. No, I don't have anything else to add.
Great. So then how do we prioritize this one? How are you feeling about the staffing and kind of being able to pull this out? Yeah.
I think it might be difficult. Well, we can prioritize it, but the metrics might be hard on this one.
Can I share something that might give people some, I guess, I don't know if relief is the right word, but I know I've been talking with who I think we will work with on the general contracting side about this, and they have experience in the past having worked with like a reintegration program in Detroit. And what I talked to them about was, what I heard this group say last time was, we want to ensure that formerly incarcerated individuals aren't excluded because they have a criminal record. Like they aren't automatically excluded because they have a criminal record. And that won't happen here. And I don't know what the specific request around formerly incarcerated potential employees was other than that, but I want you to know I've had those conversations, and that won't be an automatic exclusion, and this group has experience working with like a reintegration program. So
Do you know anything about that relationship with the reintegration program?
Other than that, it was in Detroit. It was in a project in Detroit. That's all that I know about it. I don't know.
Do you know the name of the project, per chance that it was?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
I email you and then get that information from you.
Yeah, I can find out.
Great. I think for me, it was around, like having it be open, but also like an invitation so people knew. But I appreciate that kind of checking into that. And I know we're getting close to our next time. Yeah, so the only other thing that I would say, which we've talked about a bit too, is the property management relationship accountability. So what I propose for our next meeting is where did I put these notes? but that we are kind of maybe like talk about those and then like for each of them, we kind of like, I think we already kind of have named them, but maybe say like these numbers, da 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 da, for each of the things and those accountability.
You
know,
need
I
to
think for
extend or
this,
the
it could-
meeting's over. You
Hmm?
need to extend or the meeting's over.
Oh, yeah.
Move to extend to 10 o'clock.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, just to say that, maybe we could start with that one, since we haven't talked about it yet, but then we can just go through and name all the things so that we can have them. So I'm gonna probably just like put them in an order,
Okay.
for us to go through, and then, so then people can just like think about like, we have other things that we didn't talk about tonight. Come with those, and then that way we can kind of think about that. Because one of the things for like the staffing piece, like I was like, well, it could just be like having language in like the materials that go out, for position
Definitely.
description. Like on the position descriptions, like there's a lot of times they have like a anti-discrimination thing on them, and so
Yeah.
maybe even having a call out specifically, so that would be an example.
I would like that, and I'm just gonna ask Kyle a little bit more about what this management company has done with this other reintegration org and see if that was successful. If I can get in touch with some of those people and talk about that, because something a little bit more than just having it in the job description, I would like to see.
Mhm. I think you were saying this was with the contractor.
With the contractor, right.
Yeah, and so, and I would think about these positions as being ones that would be the like full-time ongoing positions as well too. Like possibly, so.
Mhm.
All right, does that sound good? Other things? All right, y'all, thanks, this has been, oh, sorry, no, wait, one more thing. Oh, go ahead, Kai, you were gonna say something?
I just didn't know, how long you extended the meeting? I didn't want to take up like the last minute.
Oh,
But did
okay.
it-
10.
Okay. Just really quick, could you give me a 2-second on the property management relationship accountability? What is the intent with that item? I'm sorry if I missed it earlier.
Yeah,
I-
this was part of, there were a couple of things, some of it might be covered in terms of thinking about the resident committee piece. But I think that there were a number of concerns, I know like Alyssa had brought up about the property management companies and thinking the way that we can think about that is like the ways to think about the relationship with the asset management, and so whether it's, there were things around like, if a person ways for requesting accessibility upgrades or whatever, right? Like that there would be some kind of language around that, like the ease of that process or something like that.
I see.
So there were some things like that. There were some like specific issues, I think, that we wanted to just pull out and name so that it could be clear. Does that follow people?
Yeah, we didn't talk about that at this meeting, though, that you didn't miss it. The person who was gonna talk about it is not here.
No, I understand that, Tegman. I'm sorry. When I read those two items, I thought that resident committee and the property management accountability were kind of the same. And what I just heard Desiree say is sort of, but that's not a complete overlap. So that's enough for me for now. I just wanted to know for next week what we would talk about with regard to that. That's all.
Yeah, so it'll be just like more of those specifics to address some of those concerns around the property management company.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then the other thing that we didn't talk about, and I don't know what more information we would need, and maybe it's reaching out to John to think about this more, which was the, when he talked about the power plant and thinking about repairing. I know there were some things about what is already in, like, thinking about, but it hasn't gotten that far yet, so.
I know John's not on, and I would have said this if he was on too, but I think this is one of those things that I don't even know how you define that. We can't do that. We can't renovate the power plant. And I'm happy to talk with John about it next week when he's on, but that I don't know how to respond to that. It's nebulous and it's huge.
I would,
It would take 6 months to develop the process.
Yeah.
It also strikes me as something that there might be funding available from
Right.
other places.
I agree that this has been like the sidewalk. with some cities.
Mhm. So just in terms of for folks on the committee, your feelings about like if we, like I just don't want to ignore it, but if we feel like it's not something that we want to pursue, then if we can just kind of get a sense of consensus around it and then we can just move on. I think this is the last thing. If I'm just making sure that I'm covering all the things that we've come up with. I think this was the last one. So how are folks feeling consensus around the part that John brought in around the Penn Park?
I'm putting up a fist right now for.
So that's a block.
This is
Yeah.
is it a block? Okay, then I guess I'll just
Yeah.
do a one. I don't want to block it, but.
I asked and answered.
Okay, great. All right, y'all, I think we got through everything. So thank you for bringing all the information in. And I think we're in a good spot for language, so. My goal is to, make sure that we're gonna get through it. So I might be like, okay, each one we'll talk about for this time, it'll be fine, it'll be good.
I'm gonna bring in 2 liter of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola.
All right, so with no more business, can we go ahead and adjourn?
Movement to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
I.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.